So this is paper 2, question 2, and it's part 3. So just continuing from the last video where we're looking at the difference in this writer's viewpoints about a train crash. I think we left off around here. And so, you know, overall we're kind of saying that this writer is presenting his viewpoint where he's talking about the people who were affected who weren't actually at the crash, you know, the families of the victims. And he includes this part here. Despite her young age, she was already a specialist in bankruptcy and was being fast-tracked to become a partner in the company. From birth, she had suffered the partial blindness and was unable to drive. As a result, she travelled everywhere by rail. So here, the writer is presenting the viewpoint of sort of sadness for, you know, somebody who had, you know, a bright future and who sadly died as a result of this train crash. So he, you know, starts to make us feel as though, makes the reader feel sorry, feel sympathy for her, and sadness at the loss of life. You know, whereas Dickens doesn't really talk about the future of the victims, whereas Dickens doesn't really present the sadness at this loss of life, really doesn't really focus on the future or the potential future that the victims had. The future that the victims had. Yeah, so you can see that this, you know, is right. This writer's perspective is more of a reflective sort of viewpoint on the disaster, whereas Dickens is more, his viewpoint is more describing the chaos and the horror of the actual event as it happened. So, I mean, that would be a sort of perceptive comment to make about the differences in the viewpoint. So it's more of a reflective viewpoint on the aftermath of the rail crash. And then, as we go on, we get the writer's viewpoint about how the public, there was a public outcry. The outcry that followed the biggest ever safety shake-up of the country's rail network. So the writer presents the viewpoint of the public outcry. And the deep concern felt by the public about the safety of rail travel. You know, whereas Dickens doesn't really go into presenting a viewpoint about, you know, the future kind of concerns about rail travel in general. He really just focuses on the devastation of what happened while he was actually there. Okay, and then, you know, later on this idea is emphasised. Neither have boarded a British train, because he talks about the parents of one of the victims, and neither have boarded a British train since the crash and never will again. Their grief would not allow it, nor the sense of lingering injustice. So here, you know, the writer is presenting the sense of injustice, you know, and that nothing had been done to change the safety of rail travel as a result of this crash. Okay, the sense of lingering injustice means, you know, that it's gone on for a long time, lingering. and you know, nobody's actually done anything about it. So we sense the writers. I mean, I know he's giving a statement from the parents, but he's using that statement to present this viewpoint that's wrong. We sense the writer's idea of this being a wrong outcome as a result of this crash. Okay, so overall, we kind of get in the Dickens one this viewpoint of horror and devastation and the chaos of him who was, you know, actually at the crash. So his viewpoint is focusing on presenting those ideas, whereas in the newspaper article we've got this idea of the writer presenting the idea that it was something that affected people outside of the crash as well. So the idea of the mobile phones bleeping and buzzing, the mobile phones of the people trying to contact the people who were victims of the crash, and then making us feel sorry for the future of the young people who had died, which Dickens doesn't really do. And that then this leads into this idea of there being a public outcry about the safety of rail travel and how this hasn't really changed anything, that there is still this sense that rail travel is unsafe. That is what this writer is presenting, which, you know, Dickens doesn't really kind of do. Okay, so they would be the things that you could pick out. Now, I've picked out quite a few things. You may not pick out that many when you come to write your answer. But my advice is, as I said at the beginning, is to go through the first one, work out the viewpoint in that one, and then go through the second one and work out, well, how is it different? What's different about the viewpoint that's being presented here, as I have done? And then when you write your answer, you know, you can write your paragraph about source A, about the viewpoints being presented there, and then you can start writing about source B, perhaps in a new paragraph, but then, as I did in the comments, link back to how it's different to source A. So, you know, perhaps this one down here is a good idea. The presenting the viewpoint of sadness for somebody with a bright future makes the reader feel sorry, sympathy for her and sadness. And then I link back, whereas Dickens doesn't really present the sadness at the loss of life. He doesn't focus on the future of the victims. And so this viewpoint is more of a reflective one. And that's your synthesizing, when you're referring back and you're drawing links between the two texts, and you're synthesizing the evidence from two texts to draw a conclusion about the differences in the viewpoints. Okay, so I'm going to leave this video here. If I were you, I'd have a go at actually writing up the answer to this one so you get a feel for it. Okay?